Now that you are comfortable with breakpoints, it's time to expand our concepts of what can be done with these breakpoints. In this video, I'll look at adding breakpoint conditions, hit counts, action breakpoints, function breakpoints, and using the breakpoint window. Speaking of that breakpoint window, to see the breakpoint window, go to the debug menu and choose breakpoints. Here it is across the bottom of the window. It provides a useful summary of all the breakpoints currently set within the application. You can use this window to navigate to the breakpoints, disable breakpoints, and more. Here's the application running. I pressed F5. Here's what I'm going to do. On this first tab, I'm going to change the color of this ellipse by clicking on this button. Choose a color, change the button. I would like to put a conditional breakpoint in that only stops when a certain color is selected. On the second tab, clicking on this button fills the text block with a set of characters. I would like to interrupt my code at certain hit counts, how many times I've hit the breakpoint, and stop and examine what's happening in my code. And in this third example, I'll look at what's called the function breakpoint. The code's over here in this main window.xaml.cs file. I've added a breakpoint to line 39. A normal breakpoint is stopped every time your code hits it. So whenever my code runs and hits this line of code, it'll stop and switch over to the debugger so I can check out my code. To make it a conditional breakpoint, hover your mouse over the red circle and then choose this settings icon. And then click on conditions. There are a number of choices here. I'll choose this first one, conditional expression when a value is true. I can also stop when a value changes from one value to another. I'll just choose this first one. When a value is true, and the value that I want to examine is the name of the color brush. This is a class that I wrote. It's called color sample. You'll see that it's simple. It just has a color name and a color brush property. So I will say, there's my conditional statement. When the color name is equal to the string orange, then stop at this breakpoint. You notice over in the gray margin, there is now a plus symbol there. That tells me it's a conditional breakpoint. Now I'm ready to check this out. Choose blue. The application runs, no stopping. Choose yellow, the same thing. But I choose orange, my breakpoint is hit. All right, I'll switch back here, close this window. Now let's talk about the breakpoint window. When I'm sitting at a debugger, it's docked in a slightly different space. It's over here on this side of the screen. You see that I have one breakpoint here. I can do things with this breakpoint using the breakpoint window. For one, I can choose to delete the breakpoint. I can choose to add a label to it and some other things. Now, here's one of the things why you might not want to delete a breakpoint. When you start creating these complex conditional breakpoints, it takes a lot of time to set up those breakpoints. You might have 20 or 30 of these through your code. And if you delete them, you lose all that information. So what you can do instead is disable it. So I can click here and then click on this button, enable or disable. And I'll move one more line further down so you can see what's happening. Look at the color of my breakpoint. It was red with a white plus, now it's white with a red plus. That's how you know it's a disabled breakpoint. To re-enable it, click here and click this enable button again. There you go. Okay, I'll go back into here and edit this. I'll click here and choose settings again. You can add multiple conditions. Click here to add another condition. If you worked in older versions of Visual Studio, this action breakpoint used to be called a trace point. And its purpose is to let you write out some additional information to the output window. So it's like putting a debug write or a console.write line in your application, except you don't have to modify your code. So I choose action. I say I don't want to stop this time. I don't want to stop at the breakpoint. I just want to continue execution. And then this is what I want you to output to the window. Notice that the breakpoint symbol changes to a diamond now, not a circle. That's how you know it's an action breakpoint. And then I'll copy this. I'll take the hexadecimal value of the color brush and output that. And I need to put my variable inside a set of curly braces when you're doing an action. That looks good. I'll close this. I'll open the output window so you can see what's going to happen. And then keep your eye down here. I'll choose the yellow and then click the button. Now I'll choose blue and click the button. For my next demonstration, I'll look at the hit count. You notice that here inside this method, I have a for loop on line 45 that's counting from 1 to 50. And I would like to stop on this line of code, but I don't want to stop every single time I hit it. And there's no way to set up a conditional. Well, there is a way to set up a conditional. It's called a hit count, where I want to see how many times I've hit this breakpoint. So what I'll do is go over here, add a breakpoint, then edit it, choose conditions, choose from this drop down and choose hit count. And then my choices are stop when it's exactly 12, no other value. Stop when it's greater than or equal to 12. Or one of my favorites is stop when it's a multiple of 12. So it'll stop at 12 and 24 and 36. While I'm in here, let's add another condition. I have a checkbox on the form, and now I'm saying only stop when it's a multiple of 12 and when the checkbox is checked. Here I am. Click on this. It didn't stop. Now I'll check this checkbox. It stopped on my breakpoint, and if you look at the value of the counter, it's set at 12. You can also see it here in this locals window. I'll talk more about that in another video, how the locals window works. And now when I click on the continue button, it'll go to the next hit count, or the next multiple of 12. So now it stops at 24, then stops at 36, and then continues the rest of the way to 48, and then we're done. For my next demonstration, I want to look at what's called a functional breakpoint. Here's the idea. In this ticket generator class, I have a method called getTicketCount. In fact, I have 3 overloads of this method. One with no parameters, one with a Boolean parameter, and one with a string parameter. So if I would like to stop and look at my code, no matter which one of these 3 methods I'm calling, I would have to put a breakpoint here, and here, and here. And that means that no matter who calls these 3 methods, we're going to stop on each one of those methods. But a better way of doing this is to use the function breakpoint in Visual Studio and let Visual Studio figure out how many methods there are that have this name. That means if I add a 4th getTicketCount method in the future, my breakpoint would still work. To make this happen, I'll copy this, and then I'll go to Debug, New Breakpoint, and then choose Function Breakpoint. So what I do here is I type in the name of the function I'm interested in, and the language that it was written in this case it's C#, and then click OK. You'll see that there's a new breakpoint added here. It's a function breakpoint, and you can see when I run this application under the debugger, keep an eye on this code window back here when I run the application. You see what happened? Yeah, Visual Studio added those 3 breakpoints. When I shut down the application, those breakpoints go away. Basically what happened is when the debugger gets attached, Visual Studio looks through my application and finds every function written in C# with the name getTicketCount and puts a breakpoint on it automatically. And then it doesn't matter where I call this from. You see I'm calling it from this another function button here. I'm calling it 1 time here. And in this function button, I'm calling it 3 times. It doesn't matter which one of these buttons I call it from. I'll hit those breakpoints. Let me show you. I'll click on this second button, and it hits the breakpoint here in getTicketCount with the event name string parameter. All right, let's go back and look at the breakpoint window. Now you see I have 3 breakpoints in here. Let me add a few more breakpoints. I'll go over here and just add some at random, like that. So I've got about 5 breakpoints in my breakpoint window. Now we can talk about what advantages the breakpoint window gives me. Well, one of the advantages is I can come in here and, like I said before, I can enable and disable my breakpoints. I can delete my breakpoints from here. I can delete all the breakpoints that match a certain search criteria. And I can do something interesting called adding a label. So I can right click on this one, make this a label, call this one demo. And then I'll do that for this breakpoint too. I have 5 breakpoints. 2 of them have the demo label on them. And then what I can do is go into this search. I search for the label. Here it is. And then type in demo here. That filters my breakpoint list down. Then I can choose to delete all breakpoints matching this current search criteria, or I can disable or enable the breakpoints that match that criteria. I'll turn it back off so I can see the rest of the breakpoints. One last thing before I close is you can navigate to the breakpoint by double-clicking here, and it'll take you to the line of code that has that breakpoint.